Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin.
Thanksgiving at Mom's house was like clockwork. The smell of turkey, mashed potatoes, and stuffing hit me the second I stepped in the door, along with the familiar hum of old conversations and muffled laughter. I was dressed sharp, navy blazer, slacks, just like the one I'd worn for my mall security job. I couldn't tell if it was my uniform or my presence that made my mom's face tighten when she looked at me. "Melissa, sweetheart," she said, voice dripping with sarcasm, "you look so professional. A real rent-a-cop." She barely looked up from stirring the mashed potatoes, but I could feel her eyes on me, sizing me up. Kyle, my older brother, sat at the table like the golden child. He always knew how to play the part. His HR job at the local factory made him seem like the perfect success story. He shot me a quick, almost smug smile as he passed the breadbasket. "Mom's right," Rachel, my younger sister, chimed in, her voice sharp like a bee sting. "You always were obsessed with control, Melissa. But hey, at least it's a job." Uncle Tony, sitting across from me, raised his glass with a grin, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Here's to Melissa, finally growing up and finding a real job someday." I didn't respond, just quietly sipped my beer and stared at the mashed potatoes. I'd gotten used to the routine by now. The family jabs, the undercurrent of dismissal. They all had their assumptions, and I let them think what they wanted. What they didn't know, what no one at this table would ever guess, was that I had a lot more on my plate than mall security and fake uniforms. But it was easier to just stay quiet. Scene 2, dismissed and underestimated. The conversation quickly slid into familiar territory. My job. Aunt Brenda, her face twisted in concern as she poured herself more wine, turned to me with that all-knowing look she always gave me. "I don't know how you do it, dear. Working in that mall with a security guard's salary, your apartment in Pittsburgh, how can you afford that?" I bit back the urge to snap. It wasn't the first time she'd asked. Every holiday, the question came up like some sort of ritual. Kyle's voice rose. "Yeah, isn't that kind of dangerous? A lot of weird stuff happens in malls. I mean, she's barely making minimum wage for all that risk. What's your backup plan, Melissa?" I nodded, staying silent, because what was the point of explaining myself to people who wouldn't listen? Rachel, not missing a beat, leaned over to Noah and whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Remember when she used to play detective as a kid? Guess some things don't change." They all laughed. I stayed calm, watching them, even though the irony hit me like a sucker punch. I was embedded in a narcotics task force. I wasn't just any security guard. Dad, after taking a long drag of his beer, leaned in and said, "It's time you faced reality, Melissa. That job's not going to get you anywhere. You need to think about the future, get a desk job, or maybe date someone normal, like a truck driver." They all nodded, like they had it all figured out. I stayed quiet. I always stayed quiet. But inside, I was shaking my head. They were still stuck in their small-town view of the world, seeing things the way they wanted to. Scene 3, they almost got it right. Then Aunt Brenda brought up something new. "I heard a rumor the FBI is looking into some drug activity at malls in Pittsburgh. Maybe Melissa's part of it." Kyle smirked. "Yeah, wouldn't that be something? Watch out, Mel. Don't get mixed up in anything shady. Maybe you'll end up a witness in court." Noah, who thought he was the expert on everything, especially criminal justice, jumped in. "I bet that's how real investigations work, right? You chase shoplifters and write parking tickets until you get pulled into something bigger." They all snickered. I didn't laugh. I just let their words fall over me. They were close, so close. I'd been embedded with the narcotics task force for 3 years now, watching cartel members move through the very malls they thought were beneath me. But no one knew. No one would ever guess that my mall security job was the best cover I could have asked for. My phone buzzed. A call from an emergency number. I knew the routine. It was time to tune out the noise. Scene 4. The warning signs. A call. She can't ignore. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the laughter at the table, on the annoying way they never saw me for who I really was. But the buzz came again, and again, the same number. Each buzz cut through the laughter like a knife. "Mom," I said quietly, feeling the weight of her eyes on me. "I need to take this." She glanced at me, a flash of irritation in her eyes. "You're being rude. Treating your pretend job like it's real." Rachel laughed. "Probably someone lost their wallet in the food court." The phone buzzed again, and I stood up, feeling the eyes of everyone at the table on me. Dad rolled his eyes, muttering, "What is this? Are you working for the CIA now?" I didn't respond. I just walked to the kitchen, closed the door behind me, and answered. "Shaw," I said, my voice now all business. It was my DEA handler on the other end. The phone buzzed again, dragging me back to reality, but I ignored it. I wasn't going to let another interruption derail my holiday, especially not when I knew what was waiting on the other end of that call. Aunt Brenda, of course, wasn't done. She pursed her lips and turned back to me with that look she always got when she thought she was about to drop some real wisdom. "Melissa, honey," she said, all sweetness, "I just don't get how you make ends meet in that apartment of yours. I mean, on a security guard's salary, you can't possibly be able to afford it." I felt my jaw tighten. I'd heard this before, every holiday for the past 2 years, and each time it stung a little more. Rachel, overhearing, snickered, "Yeah, Melissa. I mean, it's cute that you live on your own and all, but we all know it's not exactly a penthouse." Uncle Tony, always looking for a laugh, threw in his 2 cents. "Yeah, well, with your job, that's probably the best you're gonna do, huh?" He took a swig of his wine, eyes glinting. "Rent a cop and rent a room. Not bad, kid." They all laughed, even though none of them knew what real work looked like. I swallowed the bitter taste that rose in my throat, feeling like I was suffocating under the weight of their assumptions. I didn't get it. Why did they think they knew better than me? Kyle's voice cut through the air next, smooth like butter, but just as sharp. "I'm just saying, it's gotta be dangerous, right? All that crime and no backup." He leaned forward, eyes locked on mine. "You're not exactly making big money either. What's your plan if it all goes south?" The questions came like clockwork, each one a little jab. I kept my eyes on my beer, trying to keep my face neutral. It was easier that way, easier than showing them how much their words stung. They didn't see me. Not really. Rachel, of course, couldn't resist adding in her 2 cents. "Remember when she used to play detective as a kid?" She smirked, nudging Noah. "Guess some things don't change." I clenched my fist under the table. That stupid game. I used to make up crime scenes in the backyard, acting like I was solving the world's mysteries, and now they thought it was just some juvenile phase I couldn't grow out of. But what they didn't know was that the game I used to play as a kid was real. Realer than they'd ever understand. And that same kid was still working a case. Dad, looking fed up, took another swig of his beer and let out a deep sigh. "I'm telling you, Mel, you need to face reality." His words always hit harder than I expected. "That job of yours, it's not going to lead anywhere. It's not stable, and it's certainly not going to put food on the table long term." I felt my face flush. "Reality," I wanted to shout. "You think this is my reality? You think I don't know how to handle this job? Or that I'm somehow pretending? You think I need a desk job? A normal job?" But I didn't. I didn't say anything. I just let it slide off me like water on a duck's back. I had to. Because if I said something, if I pushed back, then they'd really see me as the failure they wanted to think I was. He kept going, his voice more insistent now. "A desk job, something real. And you need to find a guy who's down to earth, like a truck driver, someone who gets it, not this pretending to be a cop thing you've got going." Kyle nodded like he agreed, and I could feel the heat rising in my chest. Truck driver, that's how little they thought of me. They wanted me to settle for a life that wasn't mine. They wanted me to be like them, to follow their paths. But I wasn't like them, and I'd never be. Then Uncle Tony, ever the one to throw gasoline on the fire, smirked. "You better have a backup plan, Mel. The precincts around here are closing left and right. What if your mall gets sold? What's your plan then?" It was like a slap in the face. What did they think? That I hadn't thought about it. That I wasn't already preparing for every worst-case scenario. The whole damn family was acting like I was some kid who needed to be protected from the real world. "You'll figure it out," Kyle said, cutting through the tension. "But maybe it's time to face facts, Mel. You're not really a detective." I felt my hands start to tremble, but I forced myself to stay still. They had no idea how close they were, how far from the truth they really were. "Anyway, just be careful," Dad said. He took a breath and shook his head. "But I don't know how much longer your mall job will last. You better start looking for something more permanent." I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for a response, but I didn't give them one. I stayed quiet, forcing my expression into something neutral, letting the conversation wash over me. Let them think what they wanted. They didn't know what I had to do every day. The real job I had was out there, on the streets, behind closed doors, where no one saw it, where no one had to know. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of proving them wrong. Not yet. Aunt Brenda, never one to let things die down, suddenly looked over at me with that knowing smile. "I heard something the other day," she said, swirling her wine glass. "The FBI's been investigating drug activity in Pittsburgh malls. I guess you might know something about that, right?" The room fell silent for a beat before Kyle snorted. "Oh yeah, Mel. Don't get yourself tangled up in anything shady. I can already see the headlines. Mall cop turns witness." Everyone laughed, but it wasn't funny. I could feel the muscles in my jaw tighten. My cousins, Rachel and Noah, joined in. Noah, always the self-appointed expert on everything criminal, leaned back, smirking. I mean, real investigations. They're not like the stuff on TV, right? They don't just hand you a badge and call you a detective. It's all paperwork, interviews, evidence. You don't get to just chase down bad guys like you're in a movie. The words stung, but I kept my face blank, watching them laugh as if they had it all figured out. I had to. I'd been hearing this kind of thing since I started working at the mall, when I was just another kid pretending to be something bigger than I was. "Yeah, Mel," Rachel said, grinning at me, "you probably spend more time writing parking tickets and chasing shoplifters than anything serious." They all chuckled like it was the funniest thing in the world, but the irony hit me harder than a punch to the stomach. They had no idea how close they were to the truth, but also how far. They didn't know that I'd been embedded with the narcotics task force for over 3 years. They didn't know that the things they joked about were real, and that I'd been chasing down something much darker than a shoplifter with a stolen shirt. I was about to say something, anything, but the vibration in my pocket cut me off. My phone buzzed once, and it wasn't the usual family group chat or some random notification. It was an emergency number I knew all too well. I didn't look at it. Not yet. Not with them all watching me, waiting for me to speak. But then the phone buzzed again, and I couldn't ignore it. A third time. I excused myself with a tight smile. "I'll be right back." I stood up before anyone could protest, the weight of their eyes still on my back. I walked out of the room and into the hallway, my fingers already pulling my phone out of my pocket. The caller ID read DEA, and my stomach sank. I stepped into the kitchen, closed the door, and answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Shaw. Detective Shaw." My handler's voice came through, clipped and urgent. "We've got a situation. We need to pull an informant off the street. They're compromised." I froze, the cold tile beneath my shoes suddenly more real than anything in that damn dining room. I didn't even have to ask who the informant was. I could feel my pulse speed up as I shifted into another gear. "Got it," I said, already slipping into field mode, the part of me that the family had never seen. "What's the extraction plan?" "Under review, but we'll need your approval. We've got a backup team ready to move if necessary." "What's the timeline?" "ASAP. They're close to being exposed. We can't afford to wait too long." I was already thinking through the logistics, when and where the extraction would happen, how we would contain the threat once it went down. I was talking tactics, processing everything in my head like I'd done 1,000 times. "Mid-level targets in custody. We might need your ID for confirmation." "Confirmed. I'll send it over." I glanced down at the screen as the call cut off and I checked the time. I needed to be on a secure video call in under an hour. I stood still for a moment, feeling the pulse of urgency settle in my chest, a strange mix of adrenaline and focus. This was real. This was my world. But back in that dining room, they had no idea. I heard laughter from the other room as I hung up the phone. They were still going on about mall cops and parking tickets, the jokes getting louder, like nothing had changed. Like I wasn't about to walk into a situation where lives were on the line, where everything I'd been working for was about to hit a tipping point. I closed my eyes for a second, breathing in. It was easier this way, I told myself. Easier to let them believe what they wanted to believe. To think this was all just some phase, some game I was playing. Let them think that. I needed to shift back into the game, the real one. So I pulled my phone back out, checked the time again, and stepped out of the kitchen, back into the holiday noise. They didn't notice me. No one did. They never would. I was just about to sit back down when my phone buzzed again. Once, twice, same number. I tightened my grip around the beer bottle, trying to ignore it, but it felt like it was pulling me in with every vibration. I could feel the heat of my mom's glare from across the table, like she knew exactly what was going on, and she wasn't happy about it. Melissa, can you please turn that thing off? It's rude to answer your phone at the table. Some of us are actually trying to enjoy our family time. She put extra emphasis on family time, like I was the one ruining it by being who I was. I swallowed hard. The phone buzzed again. The third time now. My mom's voice grew louder, cutting through the low chatter around me. Honestly, Melissa, your fake job can't be that important. Her tone was biting, sharp. What could possibly be so urgent? Rachel chimed in, her voice sweet and mockingly innocent. Probably someone lost their wallet in the food court, she said with a grin, like it was the funniest thing she'd ever said. They all laughed again, like they always did. But I couldn't laugh. I couldn't even respond. I could feel that pressure building up in my chest, the tension tightening my throat. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The phone buzzed again, the fourth time. It felt like it was vibrating in my bones now, vibrating through my skin. I stood up abruptly, maybe a little too fast, and the table quieted for a second. Sorry, I said, my voice steady, too steady. But I really have to take this. My dad didn't look up from his mashed potatoes, but his voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. Oh, sure, take your important call, Mel. You acting like you're in the CIA or something? The whole table laughed again, like I wasn't sitting there, already feeling the weight of the situation. I didn't respond. I didn't even try to. I just walked past them, through the dining room, into the kitchen where I closed the door behind me. I pulled the phone out of my pocket and answered it, my heart already pounding in my chest. Shaw, I said, trying to sound calm, but I knew my voice had changed. It was like flicking a switch. Detective Shaw. It was my handler, his voice sharp, urgent. We've got a problem. The informant we're working with, she's been compromised. We need to extract her now. My stomach dropped. My hands were steady, but my pulse was already racing. Understood, I said. What's the plan? Extraction's in motion, but we need your confirmation. They've got eyes on the target, and we need to move fast. I could hear the tension in his voice, the urgency. I was already mentally running through scenarios, calculating risks, checking timelines. Give me the details, I said, more focused than I'd been all night. When are we moving? They're preparing the team now. We need you to approve the final move in 10. 10 minutes. I felt my body go into autopilot, the part of me that had been trained for this taking over. Got it. I'll be ready, I said, then hung up. I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of the phone in my hand. The house was quiet outside, the muffled sounds of my family's laughter barely reaching me. They still had no idea. They still didn't understand. I took a deep breath, wiped my hands on my jeans, and pushed open the door. I could hear my mom's voice floating toward me from the dining room. Who was it? Another emergency. I didn't answer. I didn't even look at them as I walked back to the table. I just sat down, feeling the weight of their stares like they were carving into me. But I wasn't going to give them anything. Not this time. I took a long sip of my beer, and as the silence stretched, I let the noise of the world fade out. The door clicked shut behind me, and I was back in the kitchen. I set my phone down on the counter and took a deep breath, forcing myself to center. The air felt cold against my skin, like it was keeping me grounded, keeping me from snapping. I couldn't be the person they thought I was. Not now. The phone buzzed again. I picked it up immediately, my hand steady, but my mind was already racing through the possibilities. I didn't have time to waste. Shaw, I said, my voice quiet, sharp. Detective Shaw, this is Agent Mills. My handler's voice crackled through the line, clipped with urgency. We've got a situation. The cartel's made a move. One of our informants is missing, and we've got reason to believe your cover might be compromised. The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. My stomach dropped, and I was suddenly wide awake, my body on alert, the adrenaline flooding my veins. I could hear the hum of my family's laughter from the other room, distant, oblivious to the storm I was now walking into. Who's missing? I asked, my voice low, controlled. Where was the last known location? Informant was last seen near the Roosevelt Mall, Mills said. They were supposed to be off the grid for the next 48 hours, but we've lost contact. We're not sure if they've been picked up or if they're just laying low. I closed my eyes for a second, running through the possibilities. The Roosevelt Mall, my mall. I'd been working the case there for the past year, following the whispers of cartel activity, tracking small transactions, hoping to catch something bigger, something dangerous. Mills, we need a backup plan in case the worst happens, I said, shifting into field mode, a calm taking over that felt like slipping into armor. Get the tactical team in place. I need to know the extraction timeline, and I need confirmation on the readiness of the containment team. This goes south, we can't afford to leave anyone behind. I was already thinking through the next steps. If this was happening now, if the cartel had really moved, then it was more than just a missing informant. It meant things were about to get very real. Understood, Mills said, voice tight. We've got a mid-level target in custody. We may need your ID to confirm their identity. We're pulling your cover, Shaw. Be ready to join a secure video briefing in an hour. We'll need you to approve the final extraction plan. We'll send you the details. I exhaled slowly, trying to push the weight of the situation out of my chest, but it was like it just kept stacking on top of me. Got it. I'll be ready for the briefing. I glanced at the clock. 1 hour. I didn't have much time to make sure my laptop was secured and I was ready for whatever came next. I'd done this before. Briefings, extractions, but this felt different. The weight of the situation pressed down harder than usual. Anything else? I asked, trying to keep my tone steady, professional. Not right now. Just keep your head down and stay sharp. Will do. I hung up the phone, the silence in the kitchen a stark contrast to the noise still spilling from the dining room. The laughter, the jokes, the conversation about my mall security empire, they were still in their world, unaware of the one I was in now. I leaned against the counter, my mind spinning. The family's oblivious chatter didn't even register as real to me anymore. My job was real, and this was the part they would never understand. I had my own battles, my own risks to deal with. I wiped my hands on my jeans, my fingers still gripping the edge of the counter as I thought through the next steps. I had to prepare. This was the job, and for a second, the irony of it all hit me like a slap. They had no idea. They were still laughing about parking tickets and mall cops, and here I was, embedded in a federal operation, tracking drug cartels. They wouldn't even recognize the danger if it hit them in the face. The laughter grew louder, my brother Kyle's voice cutting through the walls like a knife. I closed my eyes, letting the noise fade away. It didn't matter. I grabbed my phone again, staring down at the screen as I checked the briefing time. 60 minutes. I had just enough time to prep my gear and get into the right headspace. But I didn't move. Not yet. I stayed still, breathing. My thoughts focused on the next steps. The next mission. When I finally walked back to the table, the jokes were still flying. Nothing had changed. I hadn't changed, not to them. But I wasn't the person they thought I was anymore, and I wasn't about to let them ever see the truth. I sat back down at the table, my eyes scanning the crowd of faces that all still thought I was some joke. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to breathe slowly, to blend back into the conversation. It wasn't easy. Rachel shot me a look, her eyes narrowing like she could see through me somehow. You've been so quiet tonight, Mel. What's going on? Trying to feel important or something? Her voice was laced with that familiar sharpness, like she was daring me to react. I didn't bite. I didn't have time to bite. I just kept my eyes on my plate, trying to stay in control. But of course Kyle, being Kyle, had to throw in his 2 cents. You probably set your own hours, don't you, Mel? He chuckled, like it was the funniest thing in the world. No one really cares when you work. You're probably off pretending to be a detective on your shift, right? The whole table burst into laughter again, like I was some sort of punchline. My stomach churned, but I kept my face neutral. I knew if I gave them the satisfaction of a response, it would only feed their fire. They'd never get it. But Mom always knew how to twist the knife just a little deeper. Honestly, Melissa, it's time you lowered your expectations. It's great to have dreams, but you've got to be okay with small ambitions, you know. Her voice was gentle, like she was saying something wise, but it cut just as deep. She wasn't even trying to hurt me. She just didn't know anything else. I let out a quiet breath and reached for my beer, trying to focus on something, anything that wasn't them. Then, my phone buzzed again. I froze for a second, feeling the familiar weight of it in my hand. I didn't even need to check. I knew it was another call from the DEA, the regional coordinator, probably. I glanced up at my dad, who was watching me with a certain kind of impatience. He'd had enough. If your job is so important, why don't you just put it on speaker and show us, huh? His voice was low, but firm. The whole table quieted for a second, all eyes on me. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I wasn't sure if I was more angry or exhausted, but I couldn't let them keep pushing me. Not now. I glanced at the phone. The number flashing on the screen confirmed it. Agent Mills. I had no choice. I swiped to answer, and the room went still. Shaw, I said, holding the phone up just enough for everyone to hear. Detective Shaw, came Mills' voice on the other end. It was calm, but urgent. Are you secure to discuss the operation? I glanced around at the table, my family's eyes wide and eager, like they were watching me in a live performance. My pulse quickened, but I knew I couldn't back down. This wasn't a game anymore. Yes, I said, steadying my voice. I'm secure. There was a brief pause, and I could hear the faint background noise of agents moving around in the field. Detective, we need you to confirm the final extraction plan for the informant. We've confirmed the cartel's move, and the team is in place for containment. We need to move in 5. Are you prepared to go forward? The words hit like a slap, but I didn't let it show. My mind instantly shifted into overdrive, calculating risks, assessing angles, preparing for the fallout. My family had no idea that while they were sitting here, cracking jokes, my world was on the edge of something much bigger than anything they'd ever imagined. I could feel the sweat building on the back of my neck, but I kept my face calm, professional. Copy that, I said into the phone. 5 minutes. I'll check the tactical readiness and confirm the final protocol. I'm on it. I was already thinking through the timeline, the extraction plan, what had to happen next. But it wasn't just the job. It was the truth. Finally, they were about to hear it, the truth they'd been mocking, the job they'd been dismissing. I lowered the phone slightly, watching my family's faces as I spoke into the line. Agent Mills, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'll be on the secure video call in 15 minutes. Get the confirmation from the team and send me the final details. I'll be ready. As I finished speaking, I could hear the faint sound of voices from the other end, giving orders, confirming plans. The buzz in my chest told me everything was about to change. But I wasn't going to let anyone at this table make me feel small anymore. Not now. I ended the call, feeling the weight of the silence in the room press down like a vice. The laughter had stopped. The jokes had died. And for a moment, the only sound in the air was the hum of my phone as I held it in my hand. Dad cleared his throat, looking at me with a mix of confusion and something else I couldn't quite place. So, that's real then. His voice was quieter now, like he wasn't sure how to handle it. I nodded once. It's real. Uncle Tony, who'd been the loudest in mocking me, was suddenly still. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Mom was the next to speak, but her words came out in a whisper. So you really are a detective? I met her gaze, holding it steady. Yes, Mom. I am. The room was silent for a long moment, and I could feel the change in the air, the weight of it. I didn't feel the need to say anything else. The truth had been spoken. The room fell into a thick silence after I ended the call. No one moved, no one spoke. I could feel their eyes on me, hot and expectant, waiting for something more. But I didn't give them anything. I wasn't going to explain myself to them. Not now. I grabbed the edge of the table, trying to steady myself, but all I could hear was the sound of my own breath in the thick air. The phone in my hand was suddenly heavier, and the weight of their gazes felt like they were pressing me down, making it hard to breathe. Agent Mills's voice had echoed in my head, every word still ringing with its cold, urgent truth. Extraction in 5. Confirm the final protocol. Tactical teams in position. They were moving. The operation was real. It was all real. Melissa? My uncle's voice cut through the silence, breaking it like a glass shattering. He cleared his throat, looking at me like I was some puzzle he was trying to piece together. So what's the deal? You're really doing this. His voice was low, unsure, but it was enough to break the tension, to turn their attention back to me. I didn't look away. Yes, I said quietly, keeping my voice steady. I'm a detective. A real one. I heard Kyle let out a breath, the sound almost like a laugh. But it wasn't funny anymore. No one laughed. They just watched, waiting for the punchline that wasn't coming. I let the words sit in the air for a beat, watching them try to process it. So, you're saying you're, like, an actual detective? Uncle Tony asked again, his face twisting with confusion. Not just playing pretend. The question stung, but I wasn't about to flinch. I'm a detective with a regional narcotics task force, I said, my voice finally rising, finally snapping into the tone I'd been holding back all night. I've been embedded in a federal operation for over 3 years, working undercover. The table went completely still. The sounds of silverware and glasses scraping stopped. I could feel their disbelief hitting me from every direction, thick and heavy. Dad's jaw dropped, his eyes wide. Mom looked like she was going to faint. Rachel's smirk faltered, and her eyes moved from me to Kyle, like she was waiting for him to say something, anything, to break the tension. But there was nothing. I looked at them, letting the silence stretch just a little longer, just long enough for them to fully understand that I wasn't lying. Finally, Dad cleared his throat, his face still pale. His voice was low, almost a whisper. A narcotics task force. He blinked, as if the words couldn't quite make it from his ears to his brain. What does that even mean? I didn't hesitate. It means I've been working with the DEA, tracking cartel activity, making busts. I've been doing it for years, and I've been in the field. I paused, watching the shift happen across their faces. The shift from disbelief to something else. Maybe fear, maybe regret, maybe something darker than they expected. And yes, I'm still working at the Roosevelt Mall. That's my cover. Your cover. Kyle's voice was flat, like he couldn't quite get it to sink in. So, you've been lying to us. All this time. I shook my head. I haven't been lying. I've just been keeping things quiet. For my own safety. For everyone's safety. There was a long pause, the kind that felt like it was stretching on forever. I could hear the faintest hum of the refrigerator in the background, the creak of a chair shifting behind me, but none of it mattered. The air in the room was thick, like it had been sucked out by a vacuum. Everyone was too stunned to move, too shocked to say anything. Mom looked at me, her face pale, her lips trembling. So, all those times you said you were working late, really working late. Her voice cracked, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. And all that time, you weren't just some mall security guard? No, Mom. I let out a breath, the weight of it finally crashing down on me. I wasn't just a mall cop. I was in the field, gathering intel, working with agents on the inside. And yeah, I've been undercover for a long time. I couldn't help it anymore. I let the frustration leak through. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell anyone. It was classified. There was no easy way to say it. There was no way to soften the blow. Rachel finally spoke up, her voice a little quieter, but still with a trace of disbelief. But you were just pretending, right? You were pretending to be some detective, like a real detective. I met her eyes, not breaking my gaze. Yes, Rachel, I am a real detective. The words felt strange, but they were true. I've been on the job for years, and now I'm being called in for an operation. Uncle Tony shook his head, a little dazed. This is too much. I don't know what to say. He looked at the others, and they all stared at their plates, the weight of the truth finally settling in. The silence stretched for what felt like forever, and I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to end this before it ate me alive. I've got to go, I said, standing up slowly, my legs stiff. I have a briefing in 15 minutes. They're waiting for me? Dad didn't say anything. He just stared at me, his mouth open, like he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. I didn't look back as I grabbed my laptop bag and walked out the door, but I heard Mom's voice, faint, from behind me. Be careful, Melissa. I didn't turn around. I just nodded once, my voice steady as I said, always. Then I left. I had barely stepped outside when my phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't bother ignoring it. It was the regional coordinator, and they were expecting me to log in for the briefing in 5 minutes. I took a deep breath, slipping into autopilot as I checked my laptop bag, making sure I had everything in place. It wasn't until I was halfway to my car that I realized I hadn't heard the sound of the table behind me, no fork scraping, no low murmurs of conversation, just the heavy silence. I opened the car door and threw my bag into the passenger seat, then leaned against the side for a second, letting the weight of everything sink in. I could still hear their voices in my head. Melissa, my dad had said, his voice so small. A narcotics task force. And Mom, her eyes wide, you've been undercover this whole time. I ran my hand through my hair, trying to shake it off, but I wasn't sure how to leave it all behind. But then my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Rachel. Still can't believe you're a real detective. Mom is reading DEA articles now. I chuckled under my breath, feeling the familiar burn in my chest. Half pride, half frustration. They were finally processing it. Sort of. I climbed into the car, fired it up, and backed out of the driveway. It wasn't long before I got the first call. Then another. The briefing was starting. Time to shift gears. But still, something tugged at me. I knew they had questions, but they wouldn't ask them all at once. I answered the first one, then the second. Finally, I was halfway to Pittsburgh, already in field mode, still processing the plan. I felt ready for everything. It was Rachel who texted next. So, the rent, the apartment, that's all. Real. I smirked slightly, my thumb hovering over the response. I typed, then deleted. The truth would land with them in time. It always did. The next text? From Mom. So proud of you, sweetie. I barely had the chance to slide into the seat when my phone buzzed again, pulling me out of the space I'd tried to carve out for myself. A reminder. Briefing in 30 minutes. Log in promptly. I glanced at the time, then at the table full of eyes still locked on me. It was impossible to ignore them. I stood up, sliding my chair back with a slight screech. I need to prep for a federal call, I said, my voice steady. You know, actual work. I didn't add the sarcasm, but I felt it hanging in the air, heavy and unspoken. The table didn't argue this time. The air had changed. There was nothing left to say. Mom's voice, small but full of something I couldn't quite name, reached me as I grabbed my laptop bag. We were wrong about you. I turned back toward her, pausing for just a moment. Her face was soft, tired even, but there was something different in her eyes now. You were just wrong about what I chose not to say, I replied quietly, trying to keep it gentle. It wasn't anger I felt, just exhaustion. They had their assumptions, and I'd let them, because that was easier than explaining. But now I didn't need to explain anymore. Rachel, of course, had to be the first to come forward. She stood up from her chair and walked over to me, her face open with something like apology. I'm sorry, Mel, she said, her voice low, sincere. I didn't get it. I should have never. I shouldn't have made fun of you. I reached out, pulling her into a hug, and for the first time in years, I felt like I didn't have to guard myself. Her arms around me felt different than I expected. She wasn't mocking me anymore. She was just my sister. It's all right, I said softly, resting my cheek against her hair. You didn't know. Uncle Tony cleared his throat from the other side of the room, breaking the moment. He was looking at me with wide eyes, half a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Well, he said, scratching the back of his head, I guess I'll never crack another joke about mall cops, huh? He grinned, a little sheepish, and the weight of the moment felt lighter, if only for a second. I smiled back but didn't answer. It was a small thing, but somehow it made everything feel less broken. As I finished packing up my laptop bag, Dad stood up and moved toward me, his expression serious but almost embarrassed. Just be careful out there, okay? His voice was rough, like it wasn't easy for him to say. I nodded, adjusting the strap of my bag over my shoulder. Always. I didn't need to say more. Mom wiped her eyes quickly, like she was trying to hide the tears that were threatening to fall, and I felt something in my chest tighten. Happy Thanksgiving, Mom, I said, my voice soft, my words sincere. I meant it. I wanted to mean it. I turned toward the door, feeling the heavy weight of everything that had been said and unsaid over the last few hours hanging in the air. But I didn't turn back. Not yet. The sounds of the house, of my family, followed me as I walked down the hallway. The quiet chatter, the clink of glasses, the occasional laugh that would ring out like nothing had changed, even though everything had. I stepped outside into the cool night air, the smell of autumn leaves thick in the air. The wind picked up just enough to make me shiver, and I made my way to the car, my movements automatic. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, even as I shut the door and started the engine. But I wasn't running away from them anymore. Not this time. I glanced at my phone, the briefing reminder still on the screen, and let out a breath. Time to go back to work, to do what I was trained to do. And as I drove off into the night, away from the house that had been my childhood home, I knew this was the moment I'd never be able to undo. The truth had been spoken, and no one could ever forget it again. Not me, not them. I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex just outside Pittsburgh, the familiar low hum of the city in the distance. It wasn't much, just a small, secure unit tucked between two older buildings. But it was mine. It was the one place I didn't have to pretend to be someone else. The cold air hit me as I got out of the car, the kind of chill that makes you feel alive, awake. I made my way inside, flicking the lock behind me. The place was dim, quiet, just how I liked it. My laptop sat on the kitchen counter, still in its bag from earlier. I tossed the bag aside, set my coffee down, and opened the laptop, letting the screen light up the small space. I logged into the encrypted system, the password second nature at this point, and started reviewing the surveillance files. My eyes scanned through images of the mall, the Roosevelt Mall, the place I'd been working as a cover, where I'd been tracking cartel activity for months. The faces of visitors blurred together in the feed, but there were a few that stood out. Not the usual shoppers. These were the kind of people who made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. I clicked over to the report about the missing informant. The name hit me hard, but I shoved the thought down. This wasn't the time to dwell. Not yet. Just as I was processing the last report, the screen flickered, and my handler's face appeared, sharp and focused. He wasn't alone. Two other federal agents stood beside him, their faces equally serious. "Shaw," Mills said, leaning into the camera. "We've got a situation. The informant's missing, and we suspect the cartel's making a move. We need to get ahead of this." I sat up straighter, pushing all the family noise out of my head. "What's the intel on the latest move?" One of the agents next to Mills spoke up. "They've been using the mall as a cover for smuggling. We're looking at a larger operation, something bigger than we initially thought." I nodded, already connecting the dots. I'd seen patterns in the traffic coming through the mall. People coming in and out, nothing obvious, but there were always little shifts in behavior. I had that gut feeling about the place. "Check the recent visitor patterns," I said, flipping through the data. "There's a couple of people who have been showing up too often. One of them's been circulating in the parking structure, acting like a normal shopper. But we've seen him in the same spot at odd hours. No reason for that unless he's waiting for something." Mills glanced at the other agents who were nodding. "You're right. We're pulling that footage now. What's the next move?" I sat back, my mind already calculating the next steps. We need to hit the weekend before they realize we're onto them. I'll prep the team and get the tactical details ironed out. We can't afford any mistakes this time. As I coordinated the plan, setting up the sting operation for the weekend, my phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Still can't believe you're a real detective. Mom is reading DEA articles now." I couldn't help the faint smile that tugged at my lips, the first real one of the night. But I didn't linger on it. There was still too much to do. "All right," I said, turning my focus back to the screen. "We're going to move fast on this. I need updates every hour. Mills, get the tactical team in position. I'll handle the coordination here." The team acknowledged, and I settled into the rhythm of the job. It felt natural, automatic. As much as my family had finally understood who I really was, this was my world. This was where I could breathe. I glanced at the time, 15 minutes before I needed to be on the secure video call with the regional coordinator. I didn't mind the pressure. It was familiar, the family stuff. It could wait. "Let's move," I said, clicking into the next screen, my fingers steady as I outlined the next moves. My phone buzzed again with another text, but I ignored it this time. I didn't need distractions, not now. Not when the job was just getting started.